In this video, we're going to talk about 5 things to avoid when playing worship piano. Stop doing this. Number 1, avoid playing worship music like classical piano music. Now, if you're a classically trained pianist, you've probably got way more piano chops than I do. But here's the thing, you've got to work to translate those skills to a modern worship music context. If you learn to play music with music theory, a traditional piano teacher, maybe you play from sheet music, trust me, you have more than enough skills and abilities to kill it from the modern worship keys position. You just have to figure out some translation work. Figure out how to take those skills and fit into the modern worship mix. That means getting comfortable playing more modern, sort of pop-centric piano parts, being able to play lead parts in the right hand, synth bass in the left, learning how to fill space with pads and layer them in with other keys parts as well. Am I in the mix? Number 2, stop trusting your sound person. Okay, now let me explain what I mean and what I don't mean. It's really important to develop a great relationship with your audio engineers. Obviously, they are the ones that really determine how you sit in the mix and whether or not the band overall actually sounds great. So I don't mean that you should stop trusting them in a general sense. What I do mean is that the more sounds you're bringing to the table, the more ownership you need to take over the mix of your own keyboard sounds. So if you're just sending full blast, piano, pad, lead, synth bass, organ, strings to front of house and asking them or expecting them to make it work, what you're gonna end up is turned down in the house. So you have to actually pre-mix your own keyboard sounds in your software, in your hardware, however you're approaching it, and then bring those sounds to the room, ask your audio engineer how it's translating. You might need to make some more tweaks. So should you trust your audio engineer in a general sense? Absolutely. Should you trust them to make up for your lack of mixing your own sounds? No. You've got to take the time and assume the responsibility to send usable signal to the sound desk. Could you step over the cables? You're gonna knock everything over. Oh, this isn't plugged in. Does anybody know what this was plugged into? Number 3, stop treating your gear like it's invincible. I'm looking at you folks who are resting your laptop stand on the edge of your keyboard stand, who have cables that are just waiting to be tripped over. Look, buying gear is expensive, it's an investment, and the outcome we're hoping for is that we're bringing something of excellence that encourages the people in our band and in our congregation. So if you can, invest in a laptop stand, or at least make sure that the music stand you're using is as stable as possible. Practice good cable management so people are less likely to trip over things. Stop assuming that nothing is going to go wrong, because if you use the same rig over and over, week after week, year after year, at some point, somebody's gonna run into it. It's just probably going to happen. So take the simple precautions that you can to make sure that when somebody bumps into it, it's not a catastrophic failure. You hear? Like all that? What do you mean you can't tell what chords I'm playing? Number 4, stop using too much reverb. Now, I'm preaching to myself here. I love reverb. Reverb is an amazing effect. It can help bring your sounds to life if it's used correctly. It can breathe life into your piano sounds. It can glue together the sounds of your pads, and you can do all sorts of cool sound designy things with reverb. What you can also do is muddy up your mix to the point where none of the hard work you're putting into your sound design actually translates in a live room. Remember, unless you are playing to only yourself in headphones, the sound is going to be sent out into a room that has its own natural reverberation. Now, every room, every auditorium, every sanctuary is different, so you have to collaborate with the people on your team, your audio engineers, to figure out how much reverb is too much. But even outside of that, I think it's really important that you don't cover up your playing by leaning too hard on reverb to fill in all of the spaces. Instead, make sure that your pads are actually voiced well. Make sure that your playing technique from piano chord change to chord change is smooth, that those changes are actually happening relatively quickly. Reverb doesn't have to be a crutch. It can be an amazing sound design tool, but I think that if you find yourself wishing that you felt like you could be more expressive and responsive in your playing, there's a decent chance you might want to dial the reverb back a little bit. Oftentimes, just a little bit less can actually bring your sounds to life, help them stand out in the mix, and fill space more effectively. Number 5, stop wasting your own time. What I mean is this: if you're a volunteer or if you're on staff at your church, you have a finite amount of time every week to prepare your worship set list. And if you're like me, you probably have more than one thing to do, right? Maybe you're learning the new song and you're also building the patch to go with it. Or if you're the worship leader, maybe you also have to prepare the chord charts or the lyric slides. The whole point is you've only got so much time to prepare. Figure out ways that you can stop wasting time doing the same thing over and over again. For me, in my own preparation, I often find that a simple lack of organization ends up costing me the most time wasted, because each week is a whole new set list and I feel like I'm starting from scratch. It's tempting to just dive right into the next week's work. But if you can identify some simple best practices for how you're going to back up or save or export out what you did last week, put it somewhere where you'll be able to use it again, and then start with a clean slate, knowing where everything is and having an organizational plan for how you're going to approach preparing, it's going to end up saving you a lot of time. The other thing is, it's really helpful if you can to set some parameters and guidelines to help you make quicker decisions. Don't overanalyze your creativity. If something sounds good to you, don't feel like you need to spend tons of time trying to dial it in to an even greater level. I like to practice the 90% rule. When something sounds 90% of the way done, I step back and I ask myself, is this last 10% easily achievable, and is it actually going to make a huge difference? If the answer to one or both of those questions is no, oftentimes I try and stop myself right there and say that, you know what, this sound is good enough, it's ready to go, I'm gonna move on. So those are 5 things to avoid if you're playing worship piano at church. Now, if you want a tool that empowers you with workflows that makes it easy to avoid some of the things we just talked about, we'll put a link in the description to our Sunday Keys template. It's an all-in-one resource designed not just with great sounds, but with powerful and quick workflows to make it easy for you to prepare and perform from the worship keys position at your church. Leave a comment and let us know what you thought about these 5 things to avoid, if there are things that you found yourself doing before, or if there's other practical tips that you'd give to a worship keys player. Maybe if you can imagine yourself when you were just starting out, what would you have said to that version of yourself? If you found the video helpful, please consider subscribing to the channel, give it a thumbs up. It's a great way to support us, and you won't miss future videos. Thanks for watching.